Although ISFPs excel in what are called the fine arts, composing must not be thought of as only writing music, but as bringing into synthesis any aspect of the world of the senses. More than the other artisans, composers have a sure grasp of what fits and what doesn't fit in any and all kinds of artistic works. And so, when an especially gifted painter, sculptor, choreographer, film director, songwriter, playwright, poet, novelist, chef, decorator, or fashion designer shows up, he or she is likely an ISFP. Composers are just as plentiful as the other artisans, say 9 or 10% of the population, and like the other artisans, they have a special talent for tactile artistry, such talent differing radically from that possessed by idealists, rationals, and guardians. As the word tactile implies, artisans know their way around in the world, their senses finely tuned to concrete reality. However, while the crafters are attuned to the tools and its uses, the composers are attuned to sensory variation, which gives them an extraordinary ability to work with the slightest nuances of color, tone, texture, aroma, and flavor. This observant sensuality seems to come naturally to the ISFPs, as if inborn. While a few of these artisans become world famous, composers in general are very difficult to observe, making this type probably the least understood of all. Perhaps such misunderstandings come from their tendency not to express themselves verbally, but through action. Like the ISTPs, ISFPs are usually not interested in developing facility in speaking or conversation. The spoken word, after all, is not as handy as the tool, and composers prefer to have their fingers, or their compensational tools, and through them feel the pulse of life. That pulse must be felt by touch, in the muscles, in the eyes, in the ears. This insistence on the senses being so closely attuned to concrete reality can, in some ISFPs, occasion a breach with language, such that they give up rather easily in their attempt to express themselves verbally. But this reluctance in speech is not so much a lack of ability as disinterest. If composers find a medium of expression, some art form, then they will express their character quite eloquently via that medium. If not, it simply doesn't come out, and no one knows them. Their reticence leaving their character all but invisible. Again, in those rare cases where remarkable skill is achieved, such as in the virtuoso, ISFPs can become celebrities, but their nature is still far from visible. Although composers often put long, lonely hours into their compositions, we must not assume that they are working on their art in the sense of careful planning and dutiful execution. On close observation, ISFPs prove to be just as impulsive as the other artisans. Indeed, they covet their impulses and see them as the center of their lives. They do not wait to act or to consider their moves, for to wait is to see their impulse wither and die. Rather, they live intensely in the here and now, and as gracefully as possible, with little or no planning or preparation. Submergence in their artistry is not preparation for something later, and neither is it artful play, such as crafters engage in with their tools. Composers are seized by the act of artistic composition as if caught up in a whirlwind. The act is their master, not the reverse, and in a sense the doing is elicited by the action itself. ISFPs paint or sculpt, they dance or skate, they write melodies or recipes or whatever simply because they must. They climb the mountain because it is there. Captured as they are by whatever actions are underway, composers seem oblivious to the fatigue, and even the pain that accompanies many of their activities. It is not that they are hardened to these difficulties as much as it is that, absorbed and excited and wholly engaged by an action, they simply do not notice the difficulties. In this, the ISFP is similar to other artisans and different from all the other types. This ability to lose themselves in action accounts for the spectacular individual works some composers are capable of. And yet they also have a social side. The ISFP is the kindest of all the types, with only the ESFP as a near competitor. Here is unconditional kindness carried to its most extreme form. In addition, composers are especially sensitive to the pain and suffering of others, and with a sympathetic impulsivity, they give freely to the sufferer. Some have a remarkable way with young children, almost as if there were a bond of mutual sympathy and trust. In some instances, a similar bond may be seen between the ISFP and animals, even wild animals. Many composers have an instinctive longing for the pastoral, the bucolic, the out-of-doors, the wilds, and nature seems to welcome them. Of course, all ISFPs have not been and need not be artists in the narrow sense of the word. Art, broadly conceived, is any action the next move of which is a free variable. And thus composers have a lot of leeway in choice of occupation, especially if they don't drop out of school early, though a great number do, since the school offers little that is of interest to them and that challenges their special talents. These ISFPs do quite well in business, particularly in decorative design and purchasing. With their kindness, they make wonderful nurses, and they can satisfy their love of nature by working in forestry, in landscape design and gardening, and even in veterinary medicine. Composers also make excellent teachers, especially of a school's arts curriculum. Subjects such as drawing, music, drama, photography, and so on. Notice that all of these careers allow them a great deal of freedom and spontaneity. It is a sad day indeed when the ISFP chooses work wherein the operations are fixed by rule or ironclad necessity. To be happy and productive, they must choose free, variable actions and be rewarded for doing them. These friendly and soft-spoken artisans tend to seek a safe anchorage in their home and family. While they enjoy their personal freedom as much as any artisan, and will roam when the opportunity presents itself, they seem to value the stability and patience of a dutiful spouse, most often an SJ guardian of some sort, to help keep them from wandering off too far for too long. Conflicts in such marriage is almost inevitable, but composers will put up with a lot more interpersonal tension than the other artisans, hanging in there to keep the family intact. Then will leave when the children are grown and go off to paint in the mountains. With their children, as with their mates, composers are great friends and playmates, though they can be hard to get to know, and their reserve can be a barrier to close relations.